So this past weekend, Big won DreamHack Open Leipzig, the opening tournament of 2020, on home soil in their first bit of success in quite a long time. And of course, it also debuted their new lineup after making some pretty drastic changes after a really poor run in 2019. I mean, the results throughout the entire year were just flat out piss poor. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was really disappointing, especially because there seemed at times that they had a lineup that could be capable of doing some good things, and it just didn't really come to fruition throughout, really the entirety of the year. I mean, they didn't have really any good placements. They, bombed out of the DreamHack Open Seville at the end of the year. They didn't make the last major. They did poor in the European minor leading up into that. They had, the last two seasons of EPL, season 10 and season 9, they weren't even able to make the finals. They got knocked out in the group stages for that stuff. Pretty much dead last or close to dead last finishes at Sydney, at the Katowice major, Starlighter season 7, ESL 1 Cologne. It really just goes on and on that there's nothing there. In fact, it's so bad that going into DreamHack Leipzig, they were ranked number 46th in the world. And I mean, I know there's a lot of variance once you kind of get below top 30, just because when you get to that point, like any one decent result can catapult you a lot of places. It's kind of one of the shortcomings of the HLTV ranking system. But for the most part, I think many people agree kind of how the top 20 works, at least, and maybe even a little bit further down than that. And it's certainly true that this team was nowhere near that considering their placements throughout the year. And it really was a whole head scratcher with all these different roster moves, because it always felt like they never found the right combination of leadership and talent. Anytime throughout 2019 that Gabi was still on the team as the in-game leader, it felt like they just had too many weak links on the team at the same time. For instance, Tizian and Nex are okay fraggers, but they're not star level players by any stretch of the imagination. Neither was Gabi. So basically, at the beginning of the year, they were relying on essentially just Tabson and Xanteris to get things done. And obviously, Xanteris is going through a crazy adjustment period with language barriers and all this good stuff. You know what? And then Nex wound up being kind of dropped from the team, and they brought Dennis on for a little while. And that didn't really solve any of the talent problems that they had. You basically just kind of replaced one of your kind of okay, decent players, not really a star level player, with essentially a player who is probably a little bit worse than Nex, right, with Dennis. So then that didn't work out. Nex winds up coming back to the team. And then you also wound up getting Smooya back on the team. So at this point, you had Xanteris, Smooya, Tabson, Next, but then you got rid of the leadership, right? So it's like you were bringing in maybe a little bit more skilled players. At least you got Next in for Dennis again, which means you had a little bit better player with Next than Dennis. And you brought Smooya back, who could be an impactful opper. You go Tabson back to rifling. These are some of the things that would make you interested, but then Gabi was gone. So now the leadership was an issue, and it really showed at the end of last year. So it just feels like if you ever could have just kept Gabi as the in-game leader, obviously retain, Tabson, figure out a way to make Xanteris work, and then get one strong opera or something like that, then this team would be rolling. And really what you've seen coming into 2020 is Gabi has, been a part of the team in some type of managerial or maybe even some type of coaching role or something like that. So he still has some presence on the team from a leadership perspective, but not obviously in the server. And then they did try to bring up some skilled players, and they tried to make the team more of a full German lineup. I mean, Xanteris is still on the team. If I remember correctly, he was getting German lessons last year, so maybe his German is coming around. Now, included in those changes are Searson coming in as the AWP, formerly of Sprout, and then before that, alternate attacks. And again, he hasn't really played in many big LAN tournaments coming into this team. Pretty much the most notable stuff they did was whenever they played at DreamHack Open Atlanta, kind of towards the end of last year, where they actually had some pretty decent wins there. They had, a win over Crazy, which was, pretty decent. They weren't quite the same roster they used to be when they were like doing well at the major and stuff like that, but still a pretty decent lineup. And he had some good games individually against Heroic, despite the fact that they did wind up losing that game, of course. That was, of course, in the finals of the tournament. And then they also had like a second place finish at this Games Class Masters event. I think included in that, if I'm not mistaken, they had a series victory over Furia. I'm pretty sure that's correct. And so had some good games against some guys over there who are at least individually fairly skilled and had some success throughout 2019 at certain periods, though obviously that team did taper off towards the end. But outside of that, it was mostly, like MDL stuff, Copenhagen games, other really smaller stuff within kind of the local German scene. And so there really wasn't a whole lot known about what this guy could do at a top level, but he was performing very, very well within the smaller regional tournaments and some of the few times that he had outings against decent level teams. And really the same thing could be said for Quito. He was obviously even a little bit less experienced than Searson, hadn't been on alternate attacks as long as someone like Searson did, same with Sprout. And again, similar kind of story for him. He did really well at DreamHack Open Atlanta and some of the games that they had against Heroic and Crazy, and also played pretty well against Fury at the Games Class Masters event, and, you know, would do fine in all their regional stuff and MDL, things of that nature. They didn't have quite the same level of numbers and same consistency level as someone like Searson. He had a lot of hype, though, within the community. I would always see things about him on Reddit or different forums and things of that nature, so it seemed like a lot of people thought he was quite skilled. Maybe he's doing well in plugs and things of that nature. Certainly, I will say that the run he's had the last, you know, 3 or 4 lands he's played, you know, with Sprout before, and then this first event with Big, obviously seems to have an upward trajectory in his land performance. So that's obviously something to keep an eye on. And that's really the changes that the team made. And so now we'll actually start talking about the tournament and how the team looks. Obviously, all they've really played is this tournament, as well as the qualifiers for Open Anaheim online, which they got knocked out on, and kind of a crazy fashion against a team I've never even heard of. And then they played in this like United Masters League where they actually lost to Sprout, which they were playing against their former team in that case for Surson and Keto, as that team obviously brought on Oscar and stuff like that. So again, really small sample size. And then what I'm doing with this video, by the way, is I'm, you know, saying Big won the event, but I didn't really do a video about Big's roster changes and about how the team was playing and stuff like that. So I'm kind of doing everything kind of all in once in one video. I'm using this tournament as kind of a vehicle to learn about this team and then kind of convey that information to you. Helps me if I ever have to work a tournament that Big's at, but also maybe can give you some insights on Big if you didn't get to watch this tournament or if you didn't get to dig deep into the demos. And essentially what happened is they won every single map at this tournament. They open up against Virtus Pro, the former Avangard team, which I had a lot of hopes that this team would actually make the finals. I mean, they have some talented players on that team between Dream Kicker and Buster in particular, and they've typically done well at tournaments in the DreamHack Open circuit, even have done well at a couple of Tier 1 events, certainly have always done really well in kind of the Tier 3, Tier 2 scene, so was really surprised to see them do really badly at this tournament, actually, and, you know, it was Big who took care of them first in the opening best of 1. Then they went on to beat Renegades to move on to the semifinals. Now, Renegades is a team I didn't really have too much insight into. I mean, obviously, I know that they were around some of the bigger tournaments, but they always would typically struggle to do much at them, but I knew that they had a couple of good individual players like Dexter. I mean, Dexter's been doing really well for a long time. So I knew that they had a little bit of talent, and obviously they made what seemingly should have been an upgrade, getting rid of Dick Stacy, who had really been struggling individually, and bringing on this Hats guy who I didn't really know anything about. So I didn't really have high expectations for Renegades. In fact, I think they actually performed really well at this tournament. They made the finals, right? So actually a pretty good little run from them. And they win that, and then they go on, they beat Heroic 2-0, and then they beat Renegades 2-0, and they win it. And they also do it on a variety of maps, right? They won games on Inferno, Nuke, Overpass, Mirage, and Dust 2. They played Inferno twice, so that was kind of their most played map. But again, really small sample size, can't read too much into the actual, you know, pick ban and stuff like that too much, though it was noteworthy that they did ban Train in both best of 3s that they played, and they picked Mirage once and Inferno once, so that seemed to be kind of some of the directions that they were leaning towards as far as picks and bans go, but again, kind of early. When you think about individual performances here, Tabson was kind of the clear number 1 player, had a plus 30 KD, a 1.36 rating. When it comes to the leaderboards, again, he topped the tournament in rating, topped the tournament in KD difference, and damage per round, and damage differential per round, as well as doing really well in assists per round and different things like that also. So really, really strong stuff there. You know, definitely probably the MVP candidate, I guess you would say, the one that would win the MVP if there was one given. I don't think there was one for this tournament. Maybe DreamHack did, but obviously I don't think HLT or anything gives away for this level of tournament. Then you had Searson, who was not that far behind, obviously was playing really well. He was certainly doing great when it came to rating and KD difference and things of that nature. Obviously, when you look at some of the categories that you really look for an opper, Searson was definitely up there in op kills per round and total op kills, opening kills per round and opening dual success was some of the other big things that Searson was really leading the charge in. So doing great, winning the opening duels with the AWP, getting map control or defending an opening position, something like that. So definitely really good to see that from Searson. And then obviously Keto also played really well, and really no one played badly, right? I mean, Xantaris was right there next to Searson and Keto as far as performance goes overall, and so they had a good performance from everyone, which typically is going to happen when you're winning every single map in the tournament. And some of the maps were actually pretty one-sided, so it gives a great little buffer, so that can be a little bit misleading, but certainly what's important is the Tabson played really well, which is exactly what you want, because he has been the star of this team for a very long time. Searson and Keto having good debuts on this team, doing well. Again, the competition level wasn't that high this event, but I mean, hey, they did beat Heroic, which is a team that at the very least has, you know, done well within, you know, the Tier 2 scene in particular, has had upset potential at Tier 1 events, have typically done well in DreamHack Open. I think they won one last year and had like another finals appearance, and had a couple of crazy stuff in the EPL group stage for Season 10. So definitely a team that is no joke. I mean, they had some talented, players on that team, between someone like Stound, who's very notable, Burrup, who usually can be quite good. Cadian's been on a tear lately with AWP, actually, has been really impressive. So that's a pretty big win. But yeah, sure, the level of competition wasn't the same that they're going to meet when they start getting some more elite tournaments, and that's something to still keep an eye on. But really what I want to kind of focus on to kind of end the video talking about this one is really focusing on some of these playoff matches. Something to note is, again, they 2-0'd Heroic in the semifinals. They played Overpass and Inferno. They started T-side in both of these games, and they had strong starts on their T-sides, particularly for a map like Overpass, getting 8 rounds, first land together, first land play on Overpass. Playing against a team like Heroic is pretty solid. This is, in fact, Heroic's pick, a map they've typically been pretty comfortable on. So this was really good to see them get 8 rounds right off the bat on their T side, and then finish pretty strong. Didn't really give up that many rounds. Only gave up 2 in the second half, so had their CT side really work for them as well. On this map, they seemed to have a pretty good default in mind. I mean, it was typically Xantares playing a lot of outside B, using him at times to lead into B when they were doing B set pieces, but he defaulted there, would lurk, but maybe go for short B control, hold pressure. Sometimes just kind of fade back. It seemed like they really favored when they went for short B to kind of load up connector a little bit more heavily, and that was kind of what they really were going for. And then Tizian typically was playing the solo role inside the connector, which, again, Tizian's kind of been known for playing kind of those solo roles for Big throughout his time on this team. More so, not as active in the map control, at least in early round situations, so that was kind of expected. Then, yeah, Searson comes in as the primary AWP. Tapson still kind of keeps a forward position as an in-game leader and being kind of that entry rifler or secondary entries, could be either one. And then they had Keto kind of being kind of a star rifler role, right? Kind of with the pack, helping get control, being a bit of a trade fragger. And they were pretty successful at running their default. Again, they were also a team that really liked to do heavy connector plays through blue into short or explode out stairs into bathrooms control instead of just always running a 3-1-1. Also had some good B set pieces, knew their smokes, knew their timings, had some faster pace, more scrimmy plays into B as well to kind of change things up. They looked like a pretty well-balanced team whenever I watched them play Overpass. I was actually pretty impressed because I know that leadership tactics was some of the things that they struggled with the loss of Gabi as the in-game leader. Then on Inferno, this is a map that, again, they had the basics down for the meta on their T side. They got 7 rounds to kick off that T side, so pretty solid showing for them there. Had their defaults established pretty well, with Xantares being kind of like the boiler and mid player, Tizian playing the apartments. Keto was kind of one of their main entries on getting B control. Tabson would float between assisting Keto on B control or helping Xantares control brackets, and kind of, again, being one of those leading fraggers looking for picks. And then Searson, of course, being the opper and kind of floating around. And again, they showed a pretty good spread of going for faster paced plays early rounds or playing the standard map control style. They had several different variations on how they would split the A bomb site, with how they would wrap moto or attack lane, typically, just smoking off arch and library. So pretty standard stuff. Again, no one's really reinventing the wheel in Inferno anyway, but they showed a pretty good balance of how they wanted to approach it. And my point is like the way that they approach Overpass and Inferno, I can see that translating against good level teams as long as their individual form kept up. It seemed like their team play, their success on winning T rounds, and just generally speaking how they approach things looked up to snuff. It looked like they actually had, a pretty good coordination about them and things of that nature. So all in all, really good win here against Heroic in the playoffs. No one really performed that well. And in fact, from Heroic, they kind of were able to outfrag them across the board for the most part. I guess Searson and Tabs were some of the standouts when it came to ADR and things of that nature, but no one really crazily jumped off the page. Their frag distribution was actually pretty tight spread across the board. All in all, really good series there. Got to see some of their tactics, got to kind of see some of their style, and it was cool stuff. Then they play against Renegades in the grand finals, and again, this is, the former Greyhound team. They had, again, just made a roster change, bringing in Hats. So not a team that I really had a lot of expectations about. In fact, I was surprised I did this well. When I was looking at the field, I was thinking that, finals appearances was likely going to be teams like Mad Lions, teams like Heroic, Ivangar I thought would actually have a pretty good shout as well, or I guess now Virtus Pro, excuse me for that. I thought those were kind of the 3 teams I had most favorited to go through. And then, yeah, in this series, it wound up being Mirage and Dust 2. Again, Big started T-side in both these games, and they got double digits on their T-sides in both these games as well. So that's really cool stuff. Individually, this is where Keto really popped off. It's actually kind of crazy to see that Keto's actually quiet at certain times, but he really just slayed out in this grand finals. Had 97 ADR total on the series, plus 20 on the KD difference. So this is where he really stepped up and shined. Tabson continued to play super fantastic, just like he had done in the semifinals. He also had 97 ADR for this series, also had a really good KD difference. And again, no one played particularly poorly. Everyone had a pretty good overall showing when it came to rating and things of that nature. And again, really big T sides, I think, is pretty crazy stuff from them. When it came to Mirage, they did have the capability of playing default. You know, Tizian playing the B app, Santeras outside A, rest kind of controlling middle, kind of a standard 1-3-1 type style. Sometimes they double up on A. They were good about flexing Searson's op on where they wanted to stick him for opening duels. You know, sometimes he would, you know, play, you know, double A with Santeras, look for a pickup A ramp or something, or, you know, just different positions. So it's good to see that he had that flexibility about how they wanted to start him out. But I will say that they definitely favored a more scrappier play style. They really seem to favor the 1-4 and 2-3 split play, particularly just kind of loading up into mid and connector and splitting the A-bomb site through ramp and connector. Also seem to like a lot of the 2-3 cat splits onto B through apartments and short, and just really seemed to like that. They had the proper flashes and smokes coordinated to be able to run those types of fast plays. They were successful in their opening duels. So it worked out. I don't know that they had as much flexibility on Mirage as they seem to have on, you know, Overpass and Inferno from what I saw. Again, they were capable of playing standard mid-control. They knew their smokes from spawn, you know, on cat and window, and they knew their protocols on how to engage, you know, ladder room or engage connector, get control. They were able to be crafty with some window boosting and be able to implement that into their game. So I did see some of that, but it seemed like they were really just driving on these faster pace split plays. And, I mean, they were, you know, pretty much just strolling through that half, and they wound up with 10 rounds. So, and they had just been that they weren't really meeting any resistance. They knew that their fast-paced plays were working. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Maybe if they got tested by another team, we would be able to see them be flexible and be able to do different things and be comfortable with it. But I just can't know, right? It could be also possible that they aren't as deep on Mirage and they could get exposed by a better team. You know, who knows, right? But so far, so good. It's kind of how I look at this. Didn't really have to do anything on their CT side. They won pistol. They 6-0'd the half. Not really too much could be drawn from their CT side on this. Just seemed like an easy stroll for them. And then Dust 2, again, 11 rounds on the T side, really strong T side. This was the map where they looked a lot more chaotic and didn't seem as set on what they wanted to do. You know, sometimes Keto was soloing something instead of being in the control group. Sometimes Santeras was in the control group. Sometimes he was soloing stuff. Tabs would do these wild, crazy, aggressive plays. Obviously, they could do like the spawn-based stuff, like just, you know, if they had a good B spawns, they'd load up 3 and B tunnels, go for a B split play. If they had, you know, a good long A spawns, they could just go for quick long A control. It's not as if they didn't know how to approach the map and didn't have the utility to do it, but they just looked way less loose. The roles seemed way more fluid. Again, I don't know if it was just because they were strolling through it, they were winning, it was the last map of the tournament. You know, maybe they were just feeling it and didn't really feel a need to kind of settle in and play more default CS and just kind of play more standard. So I don't really know. It's hard to say. It seemed like their Dust 2 wasn't as refined as the other 3 maps I've talked about, but it could just easily be that they felt like they weren't having too much trouble getting victories and how they were owning their opponent's economy. And again, Dust 2 can always lend itself to spawn-based plays and more loose styles anyway. So I can't really complain, but I do kind of wonder what would happen on Dust 2 if they got tested a bit more on their T side, if they would be able to settle in and play a more refined game. Really hard to say. But again, this video really has just been trying to kind of break down what we witnessed so far. Again, it's still way too early to call what their map pool is. It seemed like their Inferno looked pretty good throughout this tournament. That was the map they played the most, but again, they still only played it a couple of times, right? You know, they also had their win on Overpass, their win on Mirage. They don't play Train. We kind of know that. Other than that, though, we haven't really learned anything about their map pool. We certainly know that Tabs is still playing strong individually. That's good. Surson and Keto, so far, so good. Again, this team, throughout their history, has often lacked the balance of leadership and talent. Typically, they always had the leadership in God B, who can come up with these crazy nade stacks and crazy gimmicks and cool set pieces and, you know, be able to run a team default as well and just be that leader, be that general. Definitely respected as one of the better tacticians when it comes to in-game leaders in the scene, but they just always lacked for enough firepower, it felt like, when he was an in-game leader. Then they went the opposite direction when they tried to recruit more talent, still didn't get enough talent, and then also lost their leadership at God B. And now it seems as though this team still may not be as deep tactically as they were when Gabi was actually in the server calling the shots, but at least they still have his, you know, influence behind them in a support position. And then they brought in guys like Surson and Keto, who had shown some potential at a lower tier level of competition, enough to give you the idea that, hey, maybe we can promote these guys and see what they can do at an elite level. And this still wasn't really an elite level, right? But still, all in all, at least it's like a good first outing. We got to learn a little bit about them and their approach to the game and kind of what the roles are going to be. And so we got a little bit of something out of this. And so that's what I want to do this video, just kind of talk through this tournament, talk through the moves, talk through what Big's trying to do here in 2020, and we'll just have to keep an eye out on what they're going to do next. So hope you folks enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe for more content. Catch you next time.